everybody. This is Dr. David Perrodin, and welcome to the Week 1 Fireside Chat for Educational Leadership 655, People Services and Non-Discrimination, Viterbo University. So these Fireside Chats will typically be recorded midweek to the end of the week, and I'll be able to comment on some of the things that have happened during the week. But for Week 1, I record it ahead of time. And these will be about 20 minutes. I have a timer, but I would appreciate if you'd watch the entire video. So let's touch on Week 1 of the class. So we run from January 14th through January 20th. You have your video to watch on mainstreaming, inclusion, tolerance, and acceptance. And the reason I want you to watch that, it's a video that I recorded. Those terms become conflated with administrators, with teachers, school boards, everybody. What is mainstreaming? How is that different than inclusion? Well, I thought they were the same thing. If you put down tolerance, acceptance, mainstreaming, and inclusion, had everybody define those, like all the teachers at a staff meeting, the principals, whatever, people would have different definitions, and you'd find that they would have definitions for inclusion that might fit under mainstreaming, that might fit under tolerance. And so it's very important that you have inter-rater reliability on the terms that you're using throughout your school district. This is a great place to start. These 4 terms will do a lot to get you in the correct footing for people services and non-discrimination. Big difference, for example, between acceptance and tolerance. Tolerance is really the basement level. Then you move up to acceptance, then it's mainstreaming, then it's inclusion. Big difference between mainstreaming and inclusion. Mainstreaming more or less being in the physical environment, inclusion participating in the physical environment. But I talk about that in that specific podcast. So please watch that. Again, if we can get these 4 terms consistent across the school, it's going to help you a lot in your role. So the article, The Right to Select Methodology Working with Third-Party Providers. This has to be my top requested article and top request I get from districts to come in and when I do safety consulting. By the way, David, could you talk about the right to select methodology? We have third parties that we work with. They sometimes service students within the school building. So they might be an autism provider. So they're coming into the school, and then it might be one day it's one provider, the next day it's a different provider, but it's the same agency. How do we keep track of this? How do we make sure we have background checks? Who do we go to if we have concerns? Also the supplanting of instruction. Here is a plan that I want you, school, to implement for this child. And by the way, I'll come in and do the training for X number of dollars and buy my books and things like that. So the right to select methodology I wrote because I was dealing with this firsthand as a special education director. So this is going to help you a lot with how to navigate working with outside agencies. Not saying that there aren't positives of that, but just saying you need to be very aware. Even liability, what happens if somebody comes in, slips on your floor, or if there's some allegation of misconduct with that person. So how do you navigate that? You can head a lot of that off at the pass and put together very robust agreements with outside agencies, especially for mental health, if you heed the information that is in there. Timelines of inclusion. So this is a project that you will also be working on, contributing to, but basically you're looking at timelines of inclusion from through 200 years ago to 50 years ago to 30 years ago and whatever. So I want you to look at some timelines for inclusion and to have an awareness of that, how far we've come in inclusion in just a short amount of time and just kind of projecting out where we could be. So timelines of inclusion. Please post your biography by Monday, January 15th, the first day of class. Actually, it's going to be Monday, January 14th, I believe, to change that. But the first day of class, Monday, January 14th, go in and post your biography. I've already posted mine, so you get an idea. If you want to put a picture, it's up to you. We do have then a week 1 assignment. You need to find your district special education percentages. That is also typically known as the third Friday count. Here we go, the third Friday count. Go to your administrator or go to your existing special education director If you don't know that information, it's required that your district submits that to the DPI in September of each year, your basically your third Friday of September count. And you'll then have, here's the total number of students we have with disabilities, and here are the number we have with speech language, with learning disabilities, with autism, so forth, OHI. You'll be able to then put that information up. It's also available on the DPI website, but a year too old. It's okay if you have to go there to get it. But I want you to look at that data and see if anything strikes you. Like, wow, we have a higher number of other health impaired students than I thought we did, or whatever. And, you can look at some trends in your district and why things might be playing out the way they are, positively or negatively, or just neutrally. Like, here's what it is, here's what I think it means. But that's important to be aware of your third Friday counts and to look at the trend line. Are you increasing a percentage of students with disabilities, or are you decreasing? And also, for example, if I was looking at data and I started to see other health impaired numbers go up, my question would be, well, why are these going up? The answer could be that we have a lot of students diagnosed with anxiety and depression, and we don't specifically have categories to capture those outside of maybe 504, things like that. But so students are being identified and put into the category of other health impaired. It's on the rise. So might be a reason that we see that. So I just want you to be aware of your numbers. The national average and state average lie right around 13% for special education. So we do have some questions, discussion questions you'll go in and respond to. By the way, whatever you post in Moodle, I can undo. So don't feel like you can screw the system up by doing something. Don't be afraid. I can undo a post. I think you can undo a post also. But yeah, don't worry about that. And make sure that you are getting your discussion questions answered, that you're making your post by Thursday, and that you are also meeting the requisite number of posts that you need to have for the class. Go in. Hey, the syllabus is posted. So go in and get the syllabus out, and you can get the rubrics and the assignment. And I lay everything out in a calendar right in the syllabus. It's real easy to follow what's due when. But make sure that you're posting to class on a regular basis. Hopefully, like every other day you're checking in on the class. But the discussion threads are where you want to post. Now, things like, I put a post in there where you could comment about the article I wrote, working with third parties, and comment about that article. Like, hey, like I've seen this in my district and whatever. And here are some things that resonated from the article that I'm going to consider, or things that we already considered. Here's some things that have evolved in services where we've been collaborating with an outside mental health provider or third-party nursing, whatever it is. But you can give reactions right there. Those count toward your participation points for class. And then also at the end, I'll have week 1 thoughts and reflections. And that'll be a typical pattern. You'll see that come up. And that'll usually you can talk about just your reactions from class materials, from this weekly Fireside chat, things that you wanted to expand upon from the chat. So let me go in right now. So our week 1 is Foundations of Pupil Services Program. I'm going to move over here. I've got different monitors up on the sides. So in week 1, you're going to see a reflective teaching annotation. So that will actually be there for the first 6 weeks of class. You'll see that. So it's actually called like the week 1 lecture, and then reflective teaching annotation next to it. Basically, those are kind of like my main points that I want you to take away from this week. So I'm going to touch on those now. The first thing is, as a Pupil Services Director, you are always going to be pressed to make decisions fast. So it is important that you're touching base with your principals, other people involved, and keeping them informed and making sure that people don't start to come to you to answer all of the questions that maybe should be answered at a building level. But people will pressure you to make very fast decisions. And I urge people to take time, due diligence, get the information and make informed decisions. But again, you're going to have a lot of pressure to make very quick decisions. Always be acting in the best interest of the child. That's a term we're going to have a lot during class, best interest of the child. we'll also pair that with discretion. What is discretion? So discretion is your ability to interpret the rules of the school, of your district, of your policies and procedure in implementing programs. So schools that typically have a lot of discretion have site-based management, and the philosophy there is like the principal's in charge of that building. Buildings or districts that have less discretion, things are more centralized and run through district office and very much driven by very specific policies and procedures. I think there's a mix in there. What I typically see in student services for schools that don't have or that give a lot of discretion to buildings, for example, might be if behavioral things happen in buildings, it's handled informally. So it's handled informally, and there aren't records that are produced and put into Skyward or Infinite Campus or whatever the system is. That creates a problem if you're a special education director and you need to go to a manifestation hearing down the road and you don't have longitudinal data to support, that there's been a chronic pattern of behavior, whatever, with a student. Also, if you're trying to get a student assistance for certain areas and you're not documenting, like threats of harm to self or harm to others, it's very hard to do that when you can't show the pattern. Best interest of the child. Always act in the best interest of the child. So that is going way back into law. That is one of the terms that teachers, that educators are responsible to act in the best interest of the child. Now that is laminated to context and it is laminated to situations. So I'll never know when you make a decision. I can never come into that and say, I would have made the same decision. I can take the information, reproduce as much of the context and situation as I can, like as an expert witness, and say, given this, I think this person acted as someone, would reasonably act in this situation, that they acted in the best interest of the child. But it is your determination based upon your skill set, what's happening with the student at that moment, that you act in the best interest of the child. So very important, whatever you do, you are acting in the best interest of the child. Keep that at the forefront. Professional development must be ongoing. How many times is it the start of the school year, we do great professional development because we have days blocked off. So you might be doing in-services on seclusion and restraint and autism and writing IEPs and all of that. And then as soon as the school year starts, you have some new teachers join your school. You have students who come in and out. There can be pretty high turnover throughout a school year. So all of a sudden you get into November, you have a lot of new people who weren't there when all of these trainings were done. So you need to have an induction process. We'll talk about that too, of making sure that you're keeping your training materials, your start of school training materials, you're keeping those very condensed. Also, like we're keeping this to 20 minutes. And you can provide those to new people. So if you're doing a student version, if you're doing a staff version on bullying and harassment, for example, then you have those. You can provide those. It's good also to provide a mentor for teachers and then also students, like a peer mentor, a peer buddy to help them kind of learn the ropes. So that is an important role as a student services director. I see that come up a lot in expert witness work of, okay, someone joined your district in November. What kind of professional development did they receive in behavior intervention plans? Because they were working with students who had behavior intervention plans. And usually the answer is they didn't receive any training because we do our training at the start of the year and they weren't here at the start of the year. So, dun, 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 dun. Let me get down a little bit. Parent education programs. So I'm a big advocate of putting those together whenever you can. There used to be and could still be programs, FAST, Family and Schools Together, where it's a partnership between the school and parents, where they would, for example, like make a meal together and they would build bonds. I think there's extreme value in doing those types of things. I worked very hard when I was in student services. Now, I'm going to build off this. I had a situation where needed to train staff specifically on seclusion and restraint for one student. of how we would do things. Is more of a complex situation, and I wanted to build trust with the parents. So this was one time I had the parents observe when we were doing our training for this child, and I wanted them to know what we were doing. Not that I would do that across the board. I'm saying I think it's very important to keep your parents aware of what you're doing in the school. And I didn't train the parents. For example, we didn't have our trainer do that. Here we go. Just understanding the complexities of divorced parents, separations, who has legal custody, who's picking up a student, who should be at an IEP, who should be making decisions at an IEP, that you want to get guidance on that and make sure you have your staff aware of that. It's so easy for a cold call just to come into a building and somebody says, I'm Sarah's grandfather and, I'm picking her up, or she's staying with us right now and I need whatever information. And, administrative assistant secretary might give that information out. I've seen that happen. So you want to make sure that everybody is on the same page of, nope, here's the questions that we ask. Here's how we validate. Strictly advisory, parent groups. So here is something very common in schools right now. Forming groups to talk about things like school safety. So we're going to have like a parent group. And then the superintendent or the school board looks to the parent group or looks to this advisory group to make a decision. And especially when this is largely composed of parents, you can get people who really aren't professionals in the area making decisions. And then who's responsible? Example I give on this is like when a town buys a new fire truck. Our city bought a new fire truck, $700,000 cost of a fire truck. Well, they don't ask the astronomer to come in and the librarian and to weigh in on the fire truck. I mean, no, there's experts for that. So I think it's one thing if you're looking like at a school calendar and you want input and how it impacts people and things like that. But if you get to the very specific operations of a school, and especially student services, I had an advisory group they wanted to come in. They were parents of children with diabetes and talk about diabetes management and talk about type 1 management. Now, the problem was they were parents. They weren't medical professionals. So what they did for their child might not generalize to everybody else. So I'm okay with that presentation if that's being facilitated by a doctor or like by my school nurse, something to that effect with collaboration with the parents, but definitely not that something like that would be parent-led. So just want to go over again, please watch these fireside chats. I'll aim for them to be 20 minutes long. And at this point, I'd usually give a shout out to a couple students for something that was posted in the class. But please go into Moodle, make sure that you are completing everything that you need to do during every week. And then when we get toward the end of the week, typically maybe like on Friday or Saturday, I'll open up so the next week is there. And again, the class is set up so we have our number of weeks and then we hit our resource, our research module. So you become researchers. Again, thank you so much for enrolling in this class. We are currently at 17 students. So this is a bigger class. Usually this class is maybe about a dozen. So there'll be a lot of posting, which will make it very vibrant. Go in post. There'll be a lot of things to respond to. But at the same time, I'm going to do the best I can to keep up because on any given day, I'll probably log in and be like, there are 200 posts today, which is great, but I can't make 200 responses. So again, discretion, best interest of the child, making sure that you have uniform terminology with staff. Your professional development is available year round and understanding working with outside parties. So thank you very much, Dr. David Perrodin. Looking forward to week 1 here. Viterbo Educational Leadership 655.